Hey everyone, welcome to Be Our Guest, a weekly virtual happy hour with industry professionals. I'm Dev Janki, Artistic Director of Live and in Color. We are a not-for-profit theater company based in New York and Connecticut, developing new plays and musicals that promote and celebrate diversity. As a reminder, Live and in Color is currently in a rolling premiere of our commissioned virtual play, Days of Recreation. Bennington Performing Arts Center and Old Castle Theater Company, in association with Bennington College, just produced a beautiful production of this show this past Friday. If you missed it, don't worry. There is still one more production tonight, right after this show, at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, produced by Philadelphia Theater Company. Be sure to check it out. It's going to be amazing. It's been thrilling to see all these different productions of this fabulous play written by all these writers of color. Also, today is the last day of our Put Artists Back to Work fundraising campaign. 100% of the proceeds we raise before midnight tonight will go towards paying our artists for our new virtual theater projects. Our goal is $25,000, and we have only $1,000 more to raise. So head over to theaterincolor.org to donate today. Now, grab a cocktail and start leaving your questions in the comments. We have a very special episode today. We are talking to the artistic leaders behind Musical Theater Factory. Please welcome Managing Director of MTF, Aaron Salley. Hello, sir. Welcome.
Hello, hello.
Hi. And producing Artistic Director of MTF, Mantel. Hello. Welcome. It's great to see the two of you. Thank you for joining me today. Where are the two of you joining us from?
Man, you want to go first?
Okay, either of you. Aaron, where are you right now?
I am currently in Taffville, Connecticut.
And Man?
And I'm calling in from Williamsburg, Brooklyn.
And how have you guys been navigating these crazy times this past few months?
That's definitely a loaded question. It's been doing it the best that we can, We are all online for our programming, and we are rolling with this cultural awakening, and I think, Musical Theater Factory specifically, we're positioned very importantly in this industry to navigate those two things at this moment.
Well, we're going to be talking a lot about all the exciting work that both of you do, but I wanted to start sort of at the beginning and talk about, like, for the two of you, what first inspired you and made you want to be an artist? Man, you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. I think it's like always in my bones to seek for like more understanding of that which I do not understand, right? And I think like I was in church, I was a church girl, and I would never be cast as Jesus or Mary. I would be cast as Lucifer. Yes, that was my job. And people would be like, "You're so funny as Lucifer," and I'll be like, "Oh, is this a problem?" And then I start to understand, like, oh my goodness, like in hindsight, I look back and I'm like, I was really trying to have compassion and find a different like way into thinking about the scourge of the earth, right? Like what a different way of looking at it or something. So I think that kind of impulse of like, I don't understand that. What's that? That curiosity of trying to like that's the thing. And I think like artists for me are like the thing I love about the artists that I get to work with, the artists that I want to be, and the artists that I love is that abundant sense of curiosity.
Yeah, absolutely. And Aaron?
For me, I think it was, so I'm from Connecticut, and my mom used to take me and my little brother to these shows at Jorgensen Auditorium up at UConn, and they did like puppet theater, but they also had like the grad students doing small children's shows, and it used to happen on Sundays in the afternoon. And I remember going there and I was like, oh, you know what? I want to be doing that because that looks like so much fun. And then my mom introduced me to The Wiz, and I was like, wait, you can sing and dance and do this shit? I want that job. And so that's what got me into musical theater to begin with.
And did you get to do The Wiz ever?
I have never done The Wiz. I have never done The Wiz.
That's our holiday party right there. The one-person version of The Wiz is gonna happen.
Great. We'll just skip it home and we'll call it a day.
Man, you're a theater and film director, but your work truly bends forms and genres. You say yourself that your work lives at intersections. Can you talk about these intersections and how you think outside of the form when you're directing?
Sure. Yeah. You know, I remember having to articulate what I love and what I do. Like, we have to do this 1,000 times, right? As artists, like, that's actually like, it's a practice, and it's healthy. And also sometimes, like, can you just stop? But once I remember thinking about like what that really meant to me, and I found myself in the intersection of artistic, civic, and contemplative practice. So I love form. I love thinking about like an image. I love thinking about how layered images can provide more understanding towards something. And that's sort of how I think about artistry, artistic. And then the civic for me is like, oh, wow, like, what are the themes we're actually working on? How is this piece actually doing anything in society? And you can see how, like, you can't separate them completely, but like how they all operate together. And then contemplative is really the insistence on the seeking of the deep history that we're in and understanding that, but also to the point of having contemplative practices as part of a rehearsal process or so that's kind of the blend of things that I'm really interested in working with.
Well, all of that, you know, your work is always just so spectacular and so nuanced and so rich. And I think it comes from just how you think of it from so many perspectives. Erin, you actually were an actor seen on Broadway stages. Now you're forging your way in new and innovative tech startups. What inspired you to make that transition?
Ooh, so Hamilton. So actually, the story about that is I was working on Piece of My Heart at Signature, and one by one, cast members were hopping out and going to this thing about presidents. And I'm like, presidents? Why do they want people of color in this thing about presidents? Turns out it was Hamilton. And so Hamilton sucked the life out of me. No, just kidding. But I think that was the impetus to be like, all right, well, what is next after this show closes? You aren't on the list for Hamilton. You are in the opportunity now to really look at what do you want from your life. You want a family. You want things that aren't necessarily compatible with a traditional 8-show-a-week Broadway schedule. So what are you going to do? And I had started my own tech firm back when I was in high school, doing just websites and things. This is right at the advent of the internet. So like I was just starting with all of that kind of stuff, and I just snowballed that into what is now my primary career, focused on integrating all sorts of tech, mostly around AI, XR type of emergent technologies into non-traditional settings. So really helping to bring AI into healthcare. And where it's particularly interesting in this particular moment is how we can explore the use of AR and VR, so augmented and virtual realities, in theater to either augment or to replace the ways that we have consumed theater in the past, given the COVID outbreak.
Well, as we were saying right before the show, I feel like the timing of your transition into this new field couldn't have been more perfect. And I bet you're completely in demand now. Everyone's looking to you for answers. So I'm grateful to know you. So. Let's talk about Musical Theater Factory. Aaron, I know you've been with MTF since the beginning. Can you talk a little bit about how the company got started?
Yeah, so this is one of Mayan's favorite stories. We were born in the back of a porn studio. Shakina Nafak, our founding artistic director, was gifted some space. It just happened to be in the back of this porn studio. And in that space, we transformed this black box sex cave into a musical theater palace. And over the past now 6 seasons, we lost that space. We were itinerant, just moving all over the city. Then we went into partnership with Playwrights Horizons, and now we're downtown in their theater school area where we are a resident company. We've been there for, I think, the past 3 years now. Over that time period, the mission has always been the same, that we are creating a space where you don't have to have the money, you don't have to have the resources, you just have to have the drive and the creative juice to come and make something awesome. And over time, we have refined that mission and hyper-focused on communities that need particular assistance in getting their voices promoted. So we have now transitioned in our focus to really be focusing on LGBTQ voices, as well as Black and Indigenous POC voices, and bringing their voices to the same level as their white counterparts in the industry, which is something that is near and dear to my heart and really sets MTF apart from anybody else in the field.
That's amazing. Man, since you joined the company, can you talk about the evolution of Musical Theater Factory and its mission?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, I can't think of a more incredible leader to inherit anything from than Shakina Nafak, you know? Like, I think like what she did was she built an incredible community. And when I came in, Aaron and the rest of the community really welcomed me. And, you know, it was a volunteer organization. I think that the choices that they were making towards was to try to shift it out from that because it wasn't really sustainable. So that was part of hiring me to come in and to try to work to build a team that would then take us into the future, right? To like actually have a sustainable organization. And so that was one of the big things. And I think that, you know, so deep in its core is radical transformation, right? Because at the same time, at the porn studio, Shakina also got her gender confirmation surgery, right? So MTF is like quite literally like male to female. And that to me is so powerful. So that is like in the blood of the organization. The roundtables were there when I came in. The ways in which we operate of like racial justice and gender justice were there when I came in. And for me, it's really about the extension of it into like making sure that the mission says it, making sure that every part of what we do follows the heart that it was born with, right? So, or the pussy that I was born with, however far you want to go down. So like how powerful that is and like what does that actually mean? So like for me, I guess I'm like asking questions. Everyone pretty much from like my second day onwards that was at the organization stayed, right? So like people were like, oh, like they had such like deep investment. So what I tried to do was listen and go, okay, well, what's the next step? Or how do we do that even more rigorously, right? So for me, I was really excited about saying like, okay, we have all these intentions. How does this really happen, right? Like, how do we actually understand like the space we hold? Is it, what is it? Is it, oh, it's radical, it's rigorous, it's inclusive, it's intentional, right? Like what is that? And then all of us would like gather together and talk about it and go, okay, well, how does that happen? And then Aaron came on, I was like he was doing the website and some other stuff, and then like we started to talk, and we're like, oh, this is how much more far it can go. And then he came in, and then I was like, you're doing the managing director job. He's like, oh, okay. And then we started working together, and then like all of a sudden we're talking about values in the budgeting, right? We're talking about the values and how the budget works. And then he's really brought the values into the budget and the operations of how we all operate. And then I'm trying to figure out like, what are the artists we curate, and then how do we think about that? So I think like part of what the last 2 years have been is creating liberatory structures, like structures that are helping us towards the collective liberation. Mm-hmm. In a way that is sort of taking in the incredibly toxic system we're in of like, you know, like how it operates in the arts. So yeah, I think that's.
It's all just so exciting, the work you're doing. You started talking a little bit about this, Aaron. Can you talk a little more about the communities you serve and how you engage them? Oh, there's some of your wonderful people.
That's picture of Troy.
Yeah, so we center BIPOC and queer trans people in everything that we do. So we have dedicated spaces that are affinity spaces just for BIPOC, the people of Color Roundtable, and for queer trans artists, that is the Women Trans Roundtable, where the impetus for those spaces is that you are with people who have the same shared experience. So you come into the space not having to explain, not having to set ground rules, not having to set a lot of the background that a normal space, which includes a type of a white gaze or a cis gaze or a straight gaze into the space. And you once you eliminate that and you liberate your creative process, the entire process moves much faster, it moves much more intentionally, and the work done in those spaces is a lot deeper than in spaces where you feel that you have to either water yourself down or choose very specific language because you're in mixed company. That extends into the rest of the assembly line, just by virtue of who those artists are that are in those incubator spaces. And the people who then are curated throughout the rest of our programming really are sourced from those roundtables, as well as other places, yes. But that carries through into the rest of the assembly line. And the rest of starting with the 4x15 process, it is very much so about, okay, we're going to now layer in actors and singers to get things on their feet for 15 minutes of whatever segment of your work that you want to see is, right? That's something that a lot of these, the people that we serve, they can't afford that on their own. And it transforms the work immediately when you get to hear it in a human body. And then as we work through the rest of the assembly line process, all the way up to what we consider kind of the end product of what we do, it's concerts, presentational concerts. We are there to support every step of the way in all of the ways possible. Mayanne's there from an artistic perspective, connecting to people across the industry. We collaborate with Beehive Dramaturgy, who provides dramaturgy services to all of the artists coming through the assembly line. Another thing that is cost prohibitive to a lot of artists and really transforms the quality of their work. They have access to me if they need to have financial planning, or if they need grant proposals and critiques on those. The services that we provide are well beyond what is on even our website. If you actually sit down and think about, try to enumerate all the different things that we do to support, again, those core communities of POC and queer trans artists, but it's really to anybody who really wants to see change within the musical theater industry, not promoting the same narratives over and over again, but really thinking about how people today interact with the art and what is the story that needs to be told in this moment.
Well, it's thrilling, just the amount of work you all are doing, and kudos to you both and your entire organization. It's as we all know, so needed, desperately needed. Mayanne, you are also an educator in addition to your work as a director. How does being an educator influence your role as an artistic director and vice versa?
Yeah, I think about being an educator and being an artistic director in the same way, is that I have a lot of spaces to learn, right? And that everyone that I come into contact with is this like profound opportunity to learn from them, including my 8-year-old nephew. In fact, particularly my 8-year-old nephew. So I think about it as like the practice of making the room and how we're sharing together is also the practice of making the room in a rehearsal as a director, is also the practice of making the room in the board meeting to try to hear everybody and try to see where everyone's at. So to me, it's like all of the ways I've wanted to be an educator has kind of like seeped into everything else, into the principles at least of what I'm thinking about, and that it's never like top down. I'm not one of those people who's like, I love learning so much that I'm always going, wait, tell me how to do that. What is that really? And what's happened is that I feel like MTF is stronger because we have all these diverse points of views that are coming through from someone who comes in and says, what about XR? And then Aaron's like, let's do it. Like, let's learn from startup. And then Abigail, who I know has also worked with you and all the amazing work she learned from working with you, she'll come and be like, this is an idea that I learned from this. So like, I feel like that kind of learning space as a priority in all of the spaces is so fruitful.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's so important as artists that we keep learning, keep growing, keep collaborating, as you said, with learning from all the many artists that we get to work with. You just mentioned it, but I want to jump on it. You just announced your 7th season with a new initiative called MTFXR, which explores musical theater with augmented, virtual, and extended realities. What are you both most excited about with this program, and how can people get involved?
Aaron, you go first, and then I'll talk about a project.
Okay, I'm most excited about bridging, for myself personally, I'm most excited about bridging my two worlds of theater, which is my first love, and technology, which has been my second love and what's been paying the bills. What's really exciting in this moment is that it's something that is absolutely necessary in order for this industry to survive, right? We are now in a moment with this pandemic that we do not know for sure when we can be back in a theater together in the same ways that we were before. So we need to be thinking about innovative ways to still experience live performance with safety in mind. XR is one of those ways that we can do that. Right now, the technology is kind of not accessible to a lot of creators. But what we are really focused on is looking at, again, Mayanne alluded to this, I come from startup world. I look to others for prototypes into how we can adapt things into theater. So we're really looking at like the Pixar model of how they considered their technologists and their creatives to be one and the same, and how those two communities can interplay to develop something that's even greater than what the individuals could imagine. So if we're thinking about a Toy Story moment for musical theater, right? Now that we have people who are well-versed in the technology of XR playing with people who are well-versed in live performance storytelling, what can we possibly create, and how can those be even further engaging to audiences in new ways that weren't possible before? And I know that Mayanne, what project she's going to talk about, so she's going to give some like specific examples of how that can be manifest into this world.
Yeah, I mean, come on, we are on the precipice. We are always continuing on a precipice, but even more so now, right? And what I'm excited about is the technologies, the spiritual technologies of who we are in this moment, and how these technologies can actually open up more because of the ways in which we interact with them. So one of the, we're going to announce our makers cohort very, very soon. One of those makers is going to be an XR maker, right? And we have already lined up a really exciting residency that will be working with Woolly Mammoth and the National Directors Fellowship and MTF are all working in partnership to put this workshop together. And what we're going to be discovering in this workshop is how we use AR in a piece that is about Diamond Reynolds, who was the fiance of Philando Castile and went Facebook Live in the moment that he was shot by the cops, right? This piece of technology is...
Let me just jump in real quick to explain for people who don't know what these terms are, the difference between AR and VR. So augmented reality is really about taking computer generated things, right? So you have like this little gremlin that exists over here. Think Pokemon Go. That's a good example of AR, right? It's taking computer generated things and sticking them into the real world so that you can see them in your field of view and you can interact with them to some extent, right? Versus virtual reality, which is putting you in a completely virtualized world, something that does not exist at all. So XR is just a generalized term to capture all of that. You also have extended reality, which is kind of the same thing, but blurring the line between VR and AR. But we're really focused right now because it's such a fledgling type of technology that we're bringing into theater. We're really focused on the AR as an integral part and VR as a complete world building part and not really focused on the gray areas in between. Okay, back to Maya.
The phone. So she goes Facebook Live in that moment, and that sparks off and continues immense sort of understanding about Black Lives Matter, right? Like that capturing of that. So there's something about this thing and telling the story that we realize the impact of being able to come through this device. So the ideas that we're playing with in this is if, for example, the audience holds up the phone and they look at a part of the set, they call it a cloud anchor, they're able to see something come up on the phone that is not there in real life, augmented reality, right? So it exists here, but not there. In the same way in which like what we receive here is true or not true somewhere else. So we're really trying to figure out telling the stories that are really looking at how we can shift culture forward and who is not being talked about and what is like, you know, like who are the people who we need to talk about their stories, and then putting that together with tech. That is so like, that's not done in this industry. And I feel so like passionate about being able to provide that which has the least resource traditionally with the most resource of all the layers of thinking, because that's how the artists are thinking and that's what they deserve.
Well, it's, my head is spinning just thinking about it because it just sounds so thrilling and so exciting. And I can't wait to see what comes of it. You are, as an organization, you're influencing the lives of so many artists. Do either of you have anyone you looked up to in the industry, people who influenced you when you were younger that shaped who you are today as artists?
Do I have to think about that one. I'm not sure, man. You want to go first?
I have so many. I mean, you know, like, as I said, like there's so many teachers I have, right? So there are like the people that are like, I assisted, right? Like Tony Ciccone is kind of like my theater dad, right? Like I worked at Berkeley Rep for a couple of years and that was my entree into professional theater. And, you know, there are so many people that I learned from by watching Robert Woodruff. And you'll notice that like, they're mostly white men, because those are the people who were there to guide the way. The first Asian artistic director that I met was Yuriko Doi at Theater of Yugen, right? That was like massive for me to be able to like see her, and she had already like actually she had passed on the torch, you know. She was a former artistic director at that point. And I think about the people like right now who are thinking about how to recreate structure, Like, I'm really excited when I hear about how Rachel Chavkin's structuring a rehearsal room with who she's inviting in. Like, there's a position called chaplain. I'm like, yes. And I honestly feel like the people that I learned from so much right now, all the collaborators that I've worked with and are working with, for example, Jillian Walker, I got to work with her on a piece of hers. The way in which she's weaving stuff together, I felt like I was basically sitting and learning from the people that I'm working with, and because they're so intensely in my life. People like Madeline Sayet, who is a theater director and maker, Mohegan. She teaches me all the time. And Neil Witherspoon teaches me all the time. These are people who, like, I'm very grateful for being in a position where my mentors are close, they are not far. And I'm always also like excited to learn in different ways, but the deep continued in community and communication and learning together has been immensely powerful as a way of growing in artistry and community.
Our mission at Live and in Color is to provide opportunities for artists from diverse communities and backgrounds to create new stage works, very similar to what you're doing. Our two organizations actually support a lot of the same artists, such as Ardai Knox and Kula Verma and Xiang Yang. What excites you most about the artists we get to work with?
I mean, yeah, like, aren't we lucky? Mm-hmm. Aren't we lucky? I'll tell you this. Every one of those artists are shifting culture forward. Every one of those artists. That is actually what they're doing by how they perceive the world, by sharing deeply and authentically the stories where they come from. Like, I know Chiyoung's worked on Maya with you. I mean, and I know that, like his work, Eastbound, like I remember being in the audience at a development thing of Eastbound and hearing memes and hearing the mix of that here in New York was just so transformative for me, right? And in a way, like, all of the things I think that we understand is that there is no Asian monolith. Right? Like, all of these things are like, we start to understand the complexity and diversity within one block. And I feel like that's what's really important about our organizations, is that because we come from this culture, like Dev, we're both Asian and we're both so incredibly different in so many of the ways that we experience the world. And that's beautiful. And we're also probably got a lot of similarities too. Right? So I love that, like, I love that we understand that, and we're not going to put them in a box, and we're not going to check off the box on them, and they're going to be able to live in the complexity of what they're bringing to the table. And I love that that's the culture that we're making with them to shift the culture.
Yeah, it's so exciting. Aaron, anything to add?
A lot of the same things that Mayan was saying. I think what I am particularly excited about is how we are reclaiming traditional musical theater forms. Chiyoung does a lot of stuff that is innovative on what musical theater actually is, but there is a pop quality that makes it accessible to audiences in ways that is kind of subversive, really. You get people to hook in, but then the music, right? But then the story is like, haha, bitch, like, that's actually not what we're talking about. We're talking about equity in the story, right? And I think Douglas Lyons, he's another one that does the same thing. He has very pop sounding music, but the stories are actually multi-layered. Then we have people who are like Michael R. Jackson or Jillian Walker. Both of them are playing with form, not just sound. And that is particularly exciting because with Michael R. Jackson's A Strange Loop, that whole form is something that doesn't really exist in musical theater outside of maybe Sondheim to some extent. But like that complexity, especially coming from a brown body, is something that I think is very exciting for Musical Theater Factory to be part of, and is where I think the industry needs to go. Yeah, that's where I'm at.
So much excitement. We are sort of running out of time, but let's quickly take two questions Emma says, what are your first steps you take before directing a new project?
I think that one of the first steps I take is deeply understanding why I'm doing it. It has to come from like, why this, why now, what even doesn't matter, you know, the big why, and it can never be a paycheck. It can never be a paycheck. It can't, for me, it can't be survival. That's definitely taken into account whether I say yes or no to it, but I have to understand deeply why this at all, and it has to be a really good reason, like deep, powerful reason, and then I can get really excited about doing it. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take one more. Alyssa says, what are you working on right now that is exciting to do you? Thank you.
Aaron, go.
Really bringing to fruition this whole digital landscape that Musical Theater Factory is now operating under. It's challenging every day because we need to think of innovative ways to transition existing programming that already serves a purpose to an artist in a very specific way into a technology space. And so it's bringing in it's trying a lot of my past experience in tech and figuring out how we can go and morph these things into ways that are useful in theater, in some ways fail. Some ways are more successful than others, but it's really thinking about it. It also forces me to think about one of the rubrics that Mayan has us operating under all the time. What are you perpetuating? What are you dismantling? And in this process, I have the opportunity to really think about making theater more accessible, musical theater more accessible to a wider audience in the process of helping new artists create new work. So,
yeah, man.
I mean, y'all are gonna like just flip your shit when you see these makers. Like for real though, like it's about to come out any moment. You're gonna meet them. We have these incredible profiles that you're gonna like be able to like see of each one of them and how they're thinking about their work. They're really like, I think about artists as leaders, and I think about how MTF is excited about artists that are thought leaders and like embodying the ways in which their work is going to move something forward. So yeah, that's what I'm really excited about. Like it's coming so soon, and it's ridiculous, the group that is going to
drop on the 5th.
All right, well, everyone has to look out for it. How can people get involved with Musical Theater Factory?
So we have incredible programming. Like every month we have so much incredible programming. If you go to our website, mtf.nyc, friend us on Facebook, friend us on like Insta, MTF Musicals. We have so much incredible stuff going on, from the roundtables to the salons to, we have this incredible co-conspirator working group. So we have a working group to, you know, dismantle white supremacy in musical theater. That's what's actually happening. We have stuff coming up. Aaron, do you want to talk about the XR stuff coming up?
So we have XR, the program launch is coming up in about 2 weeks, I believe, in which we're introducing to our community what XR actually is and how, if you're struggling to imagine how XR can be used in your projects, then Brandon Powers is going to be there to really help guide that process, get that process started. That will be an ongoing thing that's going to underlie the entire assembly line this season. And yeah, there's tons of other things that come up all the time at Musical Theater Factory. Somebody just brings an idea to us and we're like, yeah, let's run with it and see what happens. So be on the lookout. Check our website frequently. That's mtf.nyc. We're really busy on Instagram, so check us out on Instagram too.
Yeah, the work. Thank you both. We are so out of time. I could talk to you all night. You're both so brilliant, and your work is incredible. But before we go, I want to remind our viewers that today is the last day of our fundraising campaign. Help us reach our goal, $25,000. By midnight tonight, all money goes to paying our artists. We only have $1,000 left to raise, which is just incredible. So I think we can do it. For more information, go to theaterincolor.org. Also, be sure to tune in to Be Our Guest next week when I'll be talking to James T. Lane, actor, dancer, and teacher from Broadway shows such as The Chorus Line, Chicago, The Scottsboro Boys, King Kong, and Kiss Me Kate. It's going to be an incredible conversation. Thank you to everyone who tuned in today. Thank you, Mayan and Aaron, for joining me. Will one of you lead us in a little toast as we say goodbye? Mayan, you want to go?
I will. I'm going to toast to the ways in which our industry and our field are going to emerge from all of these things with more vigor, life, and towards collective liberation.
Hear, hear. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Cheers.
Let's change the story. Come on and change the scene. Change the beginning. The ending in between. It's time to change the story. Come on and change the story.